All right, everybody has their website up and running, so let's take a look at some CSS introduction. Now, before we go into this, you might want to right mouse click on this gradient, and I put a big black border around it so you can find it. But if you right mouse click on this and then save image as, and I'm just going to save it on my desktop, but you want to save it in the same folder that you have your web page. And you can see that I'm calling it Blue Gradient JPEG. Again, following the naming conventions, lowercase, start with lowercase, use camel case, and have all lowercase extension, .jpeg. So let's go into the introduction. And you can use the file that you just opened up. Now, here's what cascading style sheets are going to allow you to do. Over on the left is our plain, we call this a naked page. This is just our text. Now, this is the most important part of the page because this is what Google is going to use, and this is what people with visual disabilities are going to read. And if your CSS ever fails, this is what people are going to see. This is at H1, so this is the big idea. These are H2s, so these are subheads. This is probably at H3, so this is a subhead. And then, of course, our paragraphs and our unordered lists. Now, this isn't the best design in the world, but you can see this is a lot more interesting after we use the CSS. Now, this gradient in the background, again, remember the difference between subtle and subtle. But this somewhat subtle gradient in the background is that little stripe of a graphic, and we told the page, the browser, to repeat it all the way down the page. So we're going to put that on our background, and you see how we go from a sort of light blue to a white. And you see right in here, our white even just blends in on the right-hand side of the page. Our H1 we styled differently than our H2s, and our H2s are styled different than our paragraphs. Now, sometimes it's okay to have like a heading with reverse text. So we could make this white text against a really dark background, but it would be only 1 or 2 words, and our brains can handle that. It's when you get into paragraphs that our brains start shutting off. So for emphasis, you could sometimes use reverse text and use it very effectively. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish. You want to build your CSS in layers. So the first layer of the cake is the content, and then the frosting on the cake is the CSS. If you take off the CSS, you're still going to have the most important part, which is the content. And here's our basic file. You may want to add, if you don't have an H1, put an H1 on your web page. Here, add H2, and then some paragraphs. Now, for these paragraphs, instead of typing in all these words, you can just rattle on the keyboard with lots of spaces and build up your paragraphs really quickly that way. Here's a second H2. Here, oh, this isn't an H3. I just made this a strong. Now, for my SEO, this would have been smarter to make as a H3. And here's just my plain page. So just for now, if you get an H1, an H2, and a paragraph, that's really all you'll need to make this work. At the top of your web page, add a style element. So I usually put it right after my title, and it's style. The type is text/CSS, and that's T-E-X-T, not test, but text CSS. And here's the comment that you use inside of your CSS, your style tag, /**/. This will be a comment. If you look up here, you can see the comment for HTML. But when you're inside the style tag or the script tag, then you want to use /*//. For those of you in here that are learning JavaScript, we can also use a // for JavaScript, but that's not available in CSS. So JavaScript allows us 2 different comments. CSS only has the one style comment. So let's try styling.
To get rid of that error, I just did the HTML out of the block from the style tag. I get no errors now. I don't know why that was.
Okay. They must have changed the evaluator. Interesting. And again, these are the pieces. This is our selector, our property, and our value. The property ends with a colon, and this whole rule in here ends with a semicolon. So let's style our H1. So you can start, and again, here's our comment, and let's style it H1. So we say H1, and then we do a curly brace, and then on the next line, we're going to say background color, and we're going to do $CE semicolon, and here's my comment saying it's light green, and then our closing. Now, we can put lots of rules inside those curly braces, but each one of them has to end with a semicolon. And this whole piece goes inside your style tag, your style element. Every time that your browser comes to an H1, it's going to go up into its head memory, and it's going to say, oh, H1, I have to color the background using this hex color. So if you have one H1 or 100 on your web page, the browser is always going to use this code to color it. And here's what your page should look like when you look at it. So here's our light gray background on just the H1. Notice nothing else has changed. Now, if you're not quite sure the color is coming up, one of the tricks you can do is you can put a ghastly color in here. So instead of the pound and a number, just type in green or pink or purple without the pound sign. You can use the words, and then do a save and check it, and you'll see a bright garish color show up. I do that often when I just need to verify that something is working or not. And then go back and put it back into something more subtle, like our gray. Now, if you want to change the color of the text in the H1, here you can see we're still in the H1, and now we're going to change the color. Now, why they didn't call this foreground dash color, I'm not sure. But to do the text, all you do is color colon, and then here you can see you see my 99. That's a nice dark blue, as opposed to FF, which would be just a garish blue. And again, these comments are really helpful later so you know what color these are, especially when you get into the more complicated hex codes. And notice both of these rules are inside the curly braces. The best way to do your CSS is one line at a time, save the file, and look at it in the browser. If you type in several lines of CSS, you're invariably going to make a mistake and you won't know which line is broken. One of the most frequent errors is students forget to put in this semicolon on the end of the line. So what'll happen is, let's say you left off this semicolon right here. This line will work, but all the lines after that will be broken. So you say, well, my background color works, but these others don't work. Well, that semicolon is breaking all the other lines after it. Everybody get your color to show up, a nice rich blue. Again, noodle around and change this 99 to an FF to see what you come up with. That's the best way to learn CSS, is noodling around. That's a computer science term. And here's what your page should look like. So now we have our nice light gray background and a nice rich navy blue text. Now, as you become an expert on web development, you're going to build up checklists in your brain. And I've added lots of checklists in my tutorials. So here's a checklist of your CSS. These are the questions you want to ask if your CSS isn't working. And it's bound to break sometime in the future. So, first question, is there a colon after the rule property? Make sure it isn't a semicolon. A colon has 2 dots. Second rule, is there a semicolon with a period and a comma after the end of each value at the end of the line? Did you spell everything correctly? Look things up. Either look in your Castro in Appendix B or look on your Spark chart. Don't guess. You can also do a quick lookup on W3 Schools. They have a great CSS section. Do you have an open curly brace and a closed curly brace for each selector? So check that. And are your values valid? So this value right here, to us it looks okay. It looks like a dark blue, right? But what's missing? You're missing the pound right in the front. If you happen to type in a word color, then you don't want the pound sign. So let's save that file, and when you come back on Thursday, we'll finish up on this tutorial and end up with a really nice formatted web page.